The House condemns From the River to the Sea as anti-Semitic. In a 377 to 44 vote, the House of Representatives passed a resolution to condemn the pro-Palestinian chant From the River to the Sea. They deemed it as anti-Semitic. Now, among those to vote against it were Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib, AOC, Jamal Bowman, Cori Bush, and Pramila Jayapal. But this is scary business. 44 people vote against it, but 377 people say River to the Sea is anti-Semitic. Help me understand why someone would make that choice.
I think they're desperately flailing. Like, they're just trying to swing at anything and trying to reaffirm their commitment in some meaningful way to the cause of defending Israel. And they're just kind of hitting the same notes over and over again. The very same issue with defending Israel exists on all fronts as it does in Congress as well. That's precisely the reason why old Hosborough tactics are no longer usable in this circumstance. And yeah. I don't think that regardless of this decision that Congress made, which I do think is very ironic, especially after they censured Rashida Tlaib, and no such censure was offered to Tom Cotton, a senator who yesterday, around the same time when this bill was being passed, was talking about how you should kill protesters who are blocking traffic for bringing awareness to the ongoing genocide in Gaza.
Right.
There's just, it's silly. It's nonsense. I think ultimately the people do recognize it. I put this, especially now, in the same category as like Democrats being like, oh, people are using chewing tobacco or Zyn. We should ban that. You know what I mean? It's just like they don't have anything else going on. So they got to act like they're doing something.
Yeah. And it serves to box the 44 people who vote no into a certain kind of corner because it looks like they're pro, anti-Semitism. It's like when they created that weird bill to ban Hamas from coming here like a month or two ago, or it was like this bill makes no sense. It's already illegal. This has no legal teeth to it. It's just a performance, but they make it look like anybody who doesn't vote for it suddenly is trying to get Hamas to like fly in on JetBlue. And it's like, that's not what this is about. It's all performance. The question, though, I have for you is, does the calculus change now, knowing that this doesn't work in the same way? In other words, Biden, for example, is doubling down, right? He's like, we're still standing next to Israel. We're still doing this. We're still doing this. Here's 14 billion more, please. He's offering. Does he pay the price for that in November? And if he does that forever change the kind of political calculus for Democrats or for any politician? Because up to now it's been side with Israel, go down swinging with Israel. It's always your best chance politically.
The more cynical side of me thinks that they will stay the course unconditionally because Israel does suit the needs of the American foreign policy interests in the region. However, I do think that the way we approach the Israel conversation is altered dramatically. I think that it will no longer be, as we have seen, the same for the Democratic Party. I don't think that the Democratic Party in future generations, future iterations of it, will offer the same unconditional support that Joe Biden offered to Israel, especially for two reasons. One, obviously, because the constituencies are demanding action in the exact opposite direction that Biden is taking the conversation to. But beyond that, I do think that there has been something that I noticed from the jump since October 8, where there have been calls for restraint from the State Department. So I think there's internal conflict, maybe two different camps, possibly even more. But in the most reductive terms, I think there's two different camps within the State Department right now, where the more realistic State Department actors, not out of care or consideration for Palestinian safety, mind you, but simply for the interest of the continuation of Israel, basically, even as an apartheid state, as a matter of fact, understand that leaving Israel unrestrained was going to inevitably cause too much destabilization. Now, obviously, up to a certain point, that kind of destabilization is great for Raytheon stocks. But once you get to a tipping point, all of a sudden nobody's making money. And I think that they recognize that. I think that they recognize that like Israel striking the consulate compound in Damascus is a massive error from the perspective of someone who is genuinely interested in maintaining the stranglehold that it has over the Middle East. If I'm America, I'm looking at that and I'm going, what the fuck are you guys doing? We have to do something about this. They are going to bring about World War III. They're going to bring about like some kind of nuclear panic here.
So does the U.S. Do Democrats, from that same cynical logic, do they do themselves a disservice by not just saying, "Hey, Israel, they got this one wrong"?
Yeah, I think so. I think that there isn't like a lot of the boundaries are on political lines at this point. I think that obviously the Republicans unconditionally have a lot of skin in the game for both the religious justifications that psychopathic evangelical Protestant churches make, you know, the Armageddon theological justifications that are very important for a significant number of people that also do have outsized political influence in this country, as we saw with the abortion situation. So that's not going to go away. I think that those Republican Party owns that constituency. So they will always be unconditionally and full-blown supportive of Israel, no matter how genocidal they may get. But I do think that the Democratic Party needs to move away from it and back themselves into a more comfortable liberal Zionist narrative. Definitely very different than the way Joe Biden has been handling it. By no means are they going to be anti-Zionist tomorrow. It's not what I'm saying at all. But I do think that they're going to try to retriangulate, especially post-Biden, in the way that they have Kamala Harris talking to Benny Gantz as though he's any better than Benjamin Netanyahu. Yeah, Benny Gantz, who famously ran on his war crimes when he was going up against Benjamin Netanyahu. He was like, no, I'm a war criminal too. Like, shit's awesome. That guy is the reasonable voice in the room, right? And I think that they will try to manipulate Israeli domestic policy to some degree, like the Democratic Party will. They'll try to have the more reasonable approach. But ultimately, I think that it will never look the same as it did before.
I think that's right. Does that any of that change depending on whether Democrat or Republican gets into office? I mean, we have a sense of what Trump will do. I mean, he was Netanyahu's better half,
buddy.
Yeah, exactly. I was trying to find a
it is funny. I mean, they're both super right wing. They obviously have an even further, more scary right wing out there, but they're like the most politically appealing right wing figure. They're both super corrupt in incredibly incompetent ways, and they're both trying to avoid criminal prosecution.
It's wild. So it seems to me I'm not convinced that Democrats or Republicans are going to give us a dramatically different outcome. You know, if Joe Biden is the gentle one, if he's the one who's the least hawkish of the two, and this is the best we get is him doing press leaks pretending to be mad at Netanyahu, or leaking that he's calling Netanyahu a dick, while still sending him $14 billion. And I don't know if I feel any better about this.
Yeah, no, the situation is dire, but also I guess it's always dark as before dawn, right? I do feel like there is genuinely a lot of attitudes changing in the American public consciousness that has truly made people who were very comfortable with the way that information dissemination worked in the past, when it was much more limited and mostly through the correct channels in mainstream media. It's truly changed the way people perceive the situation. I mean, you see the demographic breakdown. You see that anyone under the age of 35 has wildly different opinions on Israel and Palestinians than anyone over the age of 35. And I think that is not going to go away, no matter how much what's his name, Jonathan Greenblatt of the ADL chirps about TikTok making children into Hamas supporters.
So what does a reasonable solution look like? I talked to someone who's a State Department veteran, and they're still believing sincerely, from what I could see, and they're often full of shit, but he seems sincerely to believe that a two-state solution was still the only way to go. He wasn't optimistic about a two-state solution, but he thought that a two-state solution was the only actual viable option. He said when you get past the posturing and the talking points and all that stuff, a one-state solution ain't happening. So you're going to have to figure out something. And of course, right now in the UN this week, there's a conversation and a vote that's going to take place about recognizing Palestine as a state. And with member status, that also increases maybe at least the optimism around a diplomatic solution to all of this. So when you think about that and you hear all the developments, do you see a legitimate chance of a two-state solution? And if not, what is the way this thing ends?
I mean, I think currently it's a one state. I think that it already is a one state, and that the only solution is the abolition of the apartheid. That's the way I look at it. I think the idea that this is like the two-state solution is ever going to look anything different than the way that the so-called peace process has ever looked is silly. That's precisely the reason why a lot of scholars that I trust, especially as it pertains to Israeli history, like Avi Shlaim and Ilan Pape and many others, have changed their attitude from being ardent supporters of a two-state solution to a single state, a single solitary secular state, because of the as a matter of fact, ironically, because of the peace process, because of the settlements that were the real reason for why the peace process continued. It was just a way to pass the buck down as the Israeli state openly, at first, turning a blind eye to the settlements, and then openly and actively encouraging settlements and building them themselves and protecting them, and now doing pogroms at the behest of, or defending those who are doing pogroms in the West Bank. So I don't think that there is any other realistic scenario out of it. Now, how to get to that one state, I guess it starts off with a commitment to Palestinian statehood, no matter what it looks like. I believe the term is, what is it, binational?
Yeah.
Where it's like two states under the same banner,
right?
Something along those lines. With obviously international guidance, severely restricting what the Israeli state, the power players in the region, can and can't do. But that's my assessment of the situation. It's the most realistic scenario, because a two-state solution, especially 1967 boundaries, requires the forcible expulsion of 750,000 Jewish settlers in the West Bank. Almost 100,000 of said Jewish settlers in the West Bank are actually American citizens, as a matter of fact. So the idea that we would rip 750,000 settlers from the West Bank, I think, is a laughable one. I think that the reason, especially because they're the biggest freaks of all time, they believe in this religious cause that they're participating in. It's not like they're looking at it like it's free real estate and all of a sudden they're going to give up. I mean, we saw how the settlers operated in the Gaza Strip. There were only 8,000 of them at the time, but they had to be forcibly removed by the IDF.
Right.
So it would look very, I mean, that would be a dangerous prospect. And as much as some people might want to see some kind of vengeance, I don't think that that's how justice works. The only way for a truly just process to occur would be to offer reparations, not to the Israeli settlers, of course. I mean, reparations to the Palestinians. It is what we did during slavery. But so it's just important to clarify, I guess. But reparations to the Palestinians, and then offering them full-blown citizenship and working through, I guess, a successful reconstruction rather than the unsuccessful one that we had here in the United States of America.
Do you see that in your lifetime? You think any of that happens in your lifetime?
I mean, there are decades where nothing happens, and then there are weeks where decades happen, right? And I never thought that in my lifetime, if you were to tell me 5, 6, 7 years ago, like right before the turning point when a lot of these NGOs openly declared Israel to be an apartheid regime in 2021, which then gave a lot more moral permission to those who were afraid of speaking the truth about Israel's existence as an apartheid regime. Before then, if you were to ask me, like, do you think people will openly say Israel's an apartheid? That, you know, massive numbers within the American population, within the Western world, hundreds of thousands of people would be on the streets protesting the Israeli apartheid and the Israeli genocide against Palestinians, I would look at you like you got 3 eyeballs, and that has happened in a relatively short period of time. Now, obviously, that came with a cost. We're talking tens of thousands of Palestinians, men, women, children, murdered by the Israeli regime. However, people are waking up to that reality.